All right, welcome to the Explainer. Let's get straight into a super important chapter for your board exams. The rise of nationalism in Europe. We're going to do a quick revision and see how just one powerful idea literally changed the entire map of the continent. So you're probably wondering, how on earth did a single idea do all that? Well, to really get it, we need to rewind the clock a bit. Back to 1848, and this incredible dream someone had for what Europe could look like. Now this dream, it was perfectly captured by a French artist, a guy named Frédéric Soriot. He pictured this amazing world where all the countries were democratic republics just living together peacefully. I mean, it was a totally utopian vision, right? Kind of like something out of a fantasy, especially for that time. Okay, now look at this picture. The details are everything. You can see people from all over Europe, right? They've all got their own flags, their own traditional clothes, but they're all marching in one line. And check out what's on the ground. Shattered crowns. That's a huge deal. This wasn't just a pretty picture. It was a bombshell of a political statement back then. It was a dream of freedom and togetherness. So what was the big idea behind this dream? It was something totally new called the nation-state. See, before this, you just had massive empires. You could have dozens of different groups of people who had absolutely nothing in common except for, the same king. This new idea flipped that completely. It said that people who share a common identity, a history, a culture, they should have their own country. The power wasn't with the king anymore, it was with the people. And then this French philosopher, Ernest Renan, he took this idea and ran with it. He said, look, a nation isn't just about speaking the same language or living in the same place. He called it a daily plebiscite. What does that even mean? Well, think of it like a vote that happens every single day. The people are basically choosing every day to be a nation together. It's a continuous choice. I mean, wow, that's a powerful idea, putting the people right at the center of everything. Okay, so this wasn't just some nice idea floating around in art and philosophy books. Nope. This dream exploded into reality during the French Revolution back in 1789. This is where things get real. And let me tell you, the French revolutionaries were smart. They knew they couldn't just say France was a nation. They had to make people feel like they were one. So what did they do? They came up with ideas like la patrie, the fatherland, and le citoyen, the citizen. They swapped the old royal flag for the tricolor we know today. They set up a national assembly that was actually elected by the people. They made laws the same for everyone. They even made French the official language for the whole country. Literally every single thing they did was about creating this one shared French identity. And then Napoleon shows up. And Napoleon, well, he was a really complicated guy. On the one hand, he spread all these revolutionary ideas across Europe. His Napoleonic Code, it meant everyone was equal before the law. He got rid of the whole feudal system. Great stuff, right? But on the other hand, he totally crushed democracy. He brought in censorship, raised taxes, and forced people to join his army. So yeah, he was a mixed bag. He brought some modern ideas, but for a lot of people, he went from liberator to tyrant real quick. But here's the thing, even with all the problems Napoleon brought, the idea was out there. The fuse had been lit, What he did and what France did, it sparked this absolute firestorm of revolutions all across Europe. Just look at this timeline. You can literally see the waves of revolution hitting the old empires. It kicks off in 1821, with Greece fighting for its independence from the Ottomans. Then, surprise, surprise, France has another revolution in 1830. But the really big one, the one you have to remember, is 1848. They called it the springtime of the peoples. All across Europe, people were rising up demanding their own nation-states and constitutions. This was a massive, massive deal. And it wasn't all about fighting in the streets. Culture played a huge part in this. There was this whole movement called Romanticism. It wasn't about science or logic. It was all about feelings, emotions, and this idea of a shared past. Thinkers talked about the Volksgeist, which is just a fancy German word for national spirit. They believed you could find the true soul of a nation in its folk songs, its old poems, its traditional dances. It was all about creating that feeling of we. So all those exciting revolutions in 1848, that springtime of the peoples, well, sad to say, they pretty much all failed. The old kings and emperors crushed them. And after that big defeat, the whole idea of nationalism, it changed. It got a lot tougher, a lot more pragmatic, and honestly, a lot more brutal. Now, this is a really important shift to remember for your exams. The idea of nationalism basically got hijacked. It started out being all about freedom and people having the power. But the conservative leaders, the kings and their ministers, they had a clever idea. They thought, hey, instead of letting this nationalism thing destroy us, why don't we use it to make our own states more powerful? And that's exactly what they did. Italy is the perfect case study for this. Unifying Italy wasn't simple. It took three totally different guys. You had Mazzini, the soul. He was the original dreamer, the one who planted the idea of a united Italy in everyone's minds. Then you had Cavour, the brain. He was the slick prime minister, pulling the strings with diplomacy and alliances. And finally, you had Garibaldi, the sword, the action hero leading his army of red shirts. You see, you needed the soul, the brain, and the sword to get the job done. But Germany was a different story. The whole show was basically run by one man, Otto von Bismarck. He was the chief minister of Prussia, and let's just say he was not interested in liberal ideas about voting and debates. He believed that the great questions of the day would be decided by state power. His strategy was what he called blood and iron, basically military power and war. And this slide lays out his game plan perfectly. He was a master strategist. Over just 7 years, he deliberately started 3 wars. First with Denmark, then with Austria, and finally with France. Each war was quick, decisive, and pulled more German states onto Prussia's side. And bam, by 1871, he'd done it. The German Empire was declared. And this is where the story takes a really dark turn, because once these super powerful militaristic nations like Germany and Italy were on the map, this new aggressive kind of nationalism started causing some really dangerous problems. Remember that beautiful dream from the beginning of all the nations living together in harmony? Yeah, that was long gone. Nationalism was now all about us versus them. These new countries weren't content to just be. They wanted to be the best, the most powerful. They started fighting over colonies, over resources, over everything, and nationalism became the excuse they used to build their empires. The absolute most dangerous place in Europe became a region called the Balkans. See, the old Ottoman Empire was falling apart, and all these different ethnic groups, the Slavs, Romanians, Bulgarians, Serbs, they all wanted their own countries. But it was a total mess. They were all rivals, and to make it worse, the big European powers, Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, were all meddling in the region, trying to grab influence. It became known as the powder keg of Europe, just waiting for a spark. And in 1914, boom, the powder keg exploded. That toxic combination of aggressive nationalism, imperial rivalry, and all the meddling, it pulled all of Europe and then the entire world into the disaster that was World War I. So there you have it. That's the whole journey in a nutshell. This powerful idea of nationalism, it began as this beautiful, hopeful dream of freedom and people living together. But somehow, over 100 years, it got twisted into something that caused division, conflict, and, in the end, a world war. Which leaves us with a huge question, one that's great to think about for your exams. Did this whole journey for nationhood, in the end, unite humanity? Or did it just find new ways to divide us? It's something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining this explainer, and seriously, all the best for you.